you doing, YouTube? I'm back here with another video. In today's video, I want to discuss something very important. I want to look at the fact that when we study the English literature, or the transcripts, I want to say, or maybe of what we call the Bible today, we find that there's a lot of pervertedness within Scripture, and we find that basically when you go back and you look at what we consider orthodox, or what these Christians call what they consider orthodox as books, that's the majority of, like, when you look at certain versions, you'll only find 66 books. What was considered by that, and by that being as it may, we have to understand that Christians put the Bible together. When they printed it out and they got it together as canons, they made a lot of changes. The so-called English translated version, mostly because we find that it's in code. You won't actually find, or you won't really know about it until maybe unless you get exposure, or you have somebody theologically to show you that the Bible has been put in code. Like, for instance, the name church is pagan. William Tisdale even implemented that the only time they used church is during the time of when they referred to it as a pagan source. Like when Shaul, when in Acts of the Apostles, they transliterated and said it was a place of worship. It was idol worship. So we shouldn't say church. We should use synagogue, because the Yahudim people, not, or what they call themselves, they are the so-called transliteration of Jews. They didn't use anything of a pagan source. We were warned not to use that. Even when you look at the Council of Orleans in France, we find during those ecumenical councils that they even decided on what was going to be in the doctrination, or what was going to be in the doctrine of the so-called Christians. Christians are the biggest idiots and hypocrites, because they control literature, and yet they are so sophisticated they think that what they say matters the most, more than what the Most High Yahuwah and Yeshua and the Ruach HaKodesh has to say. We have to also know that the Yahudim would have never went around with an actual Bible. We would have used scrolls and manuscripts, handwritten and typewritten. We would have never really put together a hand-printed visual Bible. And we see a lot of pervertedness within Scripture, like when Shaul condemns the Greeks, or the Yahwanite people, for calling ignorantly worshiping an unknown God. God is pagan. God is from a pagan source. There's a lot of things that was changed within the English editions of what we call the Bible. There's been a lot of perverted things, and there's been a lot of misconception. Even William Tisdale was making too many changes that was going too far in English, away from the actual writings and Shemitic languages that Yahshua and them spoke, or the actual text. So we have to understand that by Christians making these changes and codifying and putting it in code, they altered it to where they wanted it to be. Like when you look at the church fathers like Saint Jerome, you look at Lufidius, I hope I'm saying that right. You look at Pope that Damasius. You look at the councils like I'm reading on here right here. You see Clement Alexander, Origen. You find a lot of the so-called books that was re-added in the Catholics and other monolithic religions. You'll find that they were re-added because they had got approval by these church fathers and these ecumenical councils, like the Council of Hippo, Council of Carthage, just the councils that they had, that was put together by these Orthodox so-called and Christian believers and bishops. So we must understand that when you control literature, you control what a person thinks. What's so important is even like when you look at in the wisdom of Sirach, or hope I'm saying that right, we consider the Ecclesiastics, like the apocryphal book of the Ecclesiastics. That was considered somewhat approvable, and that's why the Catholics and the Christians will go back and re-add. The Christians were some of the main people, the Christians are some of the main people that attack the apocrypha, and they go right back and use it for sources of what happened to the Shelah, or the apostles, as far as their deaths, and as far as the Nabah, or what we would say in English as the prophets. They will go back and use these sources, but yet they say the apocrypha is non-canonical and it's not orthodox. So everything that was put more like in the basic scripts, like 66 books, that was one of the reasons, because they were only going up what they were considered orthodox through these church fathers and through these councils. That's why I tell people that